Good morning and welcome to the first annual Women in Science Symposium. My name is Jen Crawford and I'm the VP of Outreach for the Association for Women in Science Chicago Area Chapter. AWIS is a national nonprofit dedicated to achieving equity and full participation in women in all areas of science, technology, and engineering. Here in Chicago, we host monthly professional and social events throughout the city and suburbs that focus on areas of career development, scientific outreach, networking, and of course, the occasional wine tasting. I would like to make a special thank you to all of our 18 benevolent sponsors. Without your support, we would not have had the chance to gather here today for this exciting program. All the sponsors will be scrolling on the screen back here. Also to our 18 distinguished steering committee members, your contributions of both time and subject matter knowledge are what have formed this program into the outstanding symposium we have ahead of us today. If you would please stand and be recognized, the steering committee. At this time, I'd also like to direct you to a special item that has been placed in your program bag. It has been officially proclaimed by the Office of Mayor Richard M. Daley that today, April 17th, for now and evermore be known as Women in Science Day here in Chicago. With that, please give yourselves a round of applause as we celebrate today and look towards the positive impact of future scientific successes for female scientists throughout Chicago. Please note that for post-production purposes, this symposium will be audio and video recorded as well as photographed. And if in respect of the panelists, you would please silence your cell phones, we'd appreciate that as well. And now my partner and co-chair, Erin Dragato from C2ST.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you, Jen. My name is Erin Dragato, as most of you know. I'm managing director of the Chicago Council on Science and Technology. Some of you may know and are members of our organization, but we are a new organization in Chicago dedicated to raising the awareness of science and technology among our Chicagoland citizens. We do this by hosting monthly events and programs, not as elaborate as this one, but very informative. So feel free to visit our booth throughout the day if you want more information on those and any membership. We're very pleased to host this event with the Association for Women in Science, and just wanted to recognize that we will continue to do this, and our steering committee was a very strong leader in helping us plan this event as well, and they're also listed on the back of your program and their affiliations. We anticipate this to be an annual event, as I mentioned, which incorporates women from various facets and level of science to participate. So thank you for spending your day with us today. Before I introduce Dr. Young-Ki Kim, I wanted to recognize a few people in the audience. Dr. Alan Schriesheim, president of our organization, Chicago Council on Science and Technology. If you would please stand. When Dr. Schriesheim was director at Argonne National Laboratory, he started the Women in Science group there 20 years ago. Is that correct? Well, he doesn't. So we thank you for being here. Now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Young-Ki Kim, Deputy Director at Fermi National Lab and Professor of Physics at University of Chicago. Her role at Fermi she leads and manages development and implementation of the strategic plan and establishes the oversight mechanisms to ensure the compliance with the plan. Dr. Kim is an experimental particle physicist whose research focuses on understanding the origin of mass for fundamental particles. Prior to her role as Deputy Director of Fermi, Dr. Kim served as a co-spokesperson for CDF collaboration at Fermi Lab's Tevatron, a collaboration with more than 600 physicists from around the world. She was awarded Korea's Ho-Am Prize, given to those who have made outstanding contributions in the development of science and culture. She has an APS Fellow and has been a recipient of the Alfred Sloan Foundation Fellowship, as well as an award from the NSF Professional Opportunities for Women in Research. So without further ado, a round of applause for Dr. Kim.
Thank you. That was really generous introduction. So I see it's really good to have or good to see so many of us in science and technology all get together here. Now we have Al and a few, how many male in this audience? I see 2, 3, 4. So now you understand what most of women feel. I think this is very important that, just being in kind of different shoes and then understand the feeling. Maybe not, but I hope you have some sense of what many of us have felt and have been feeling so far. So as Aaron and Jennifer described to you some of the sort of reasons why we have this symposium, and as also you heard, we hope that this is just first a kickoff symposium, and we continue to have a much even better and more productive symposium. For that, we need a lot of feedback from you. So please don't be shy. I'm sure you are not shy. Just let us know what goes well and what doesn't, and what kind of new things you would like to add in the future. So if you go to next slide. So, oh, sorry, I'm supposed to control that. So just briefly, what we're trying to do today is the following. First of all, many of us being together, I think it itself is quite plays an important role for all of us. We often in our working environment, we are sort of minorities in many cases, but seeing many of us all together, I think it's very encouraging and very supportive. So this kind of symposium, I think it helps significantly for all of us. So we, first of all, would like to, again, get together and understand some of the facts, obviously, and that's one of the outcomes we expect to have. Another one is also to create a sense of the solidarity, things I talked about, being together, encouraging, supportive. I think that's very, very important for especially women in science and technology. And also, hopefully, we will find the solutions for future, and also broadening the spectrum of opportunities of women in science and technology, especially in Chicagoland. So we are going to have this symposium, the 3 sort of discussion sessions. One is a roundtable discussion session, and the other 2 are a panel discussion. So first one, that will be after this, my sort of brief remarks. So we'll have the panel, or this group of 4 women scientists. We'll hear insights from the field that covering their personal stories or professional stories and so on and so forth. That'll be about an hour, and then we'll have a break, followed by 2, this first panel session. That's sort of understanding the status of the women in science and technology right now. So then we'll have lunch at the second panel discussion. We look forward what to be done to be a better status for the women in science and technology. So that's sort of a 3 discussion sessions we'll have. And in addition, toward the end of lunch break, we'll have the keynote address and also covering some of those issues. And we'll have a breakout session toward the end of this symposium, so that's for an hour, 3 to 4. So there are 3 the sessions, so you can pick and choose. First one is navigating the power structure. Second is education and outreach. Third one is career mentoring. That followed by, again, this sort of reception with a cocktail. And networking is extremely important, so hope that during coffee break and lunch break, you just mingle and just introduce yourself, each other, and find out, and the network, as I said, quite important. Of course, with a little bit of alcohol, that we can just loosen ourselves, and I'm sure there will be alcohol certainly help us just networking. So so as Aaron mentioned, and also Jennifer mentioned, that there are 18 sponsors. It's beyond this, their financial support. I think this really means that all these institutions really behind the women in science and technology. So I value their again sponsoring this symposium beyond just the financial, but they really care for women in science and technology. That's how I view, and I would like to thank all of them. And the steering committee, you saw them all stood up, and I hope you remember their faces, or they have also the the name tag, it says the steering committee. So if you have any questions or any comments during the symposium, please just approach one of them and ask their questions or comments. Now, our first round, the discussion will be roundtable discussion. This will be led by Brenda Russell. She's a professor of physiology, biophysics, bioengineering, and medicine, and Executive Associate Vice Chancellor for Research at the University of Illinois at Chicago. So let's welcome Brenda and our panelists.
Wake up. Well, good morning, and I'm going to introduce the panel. We're seated the way we are in the program, and I'm not going to read the script on everybody. You can do that for yourselves. So next to me is Catherine Faber, Walter P. Murphy Professor of Materials Science and Engineering from Northwestern, and then Evelyn Gates, Assistant Director, Cavell Institute for Cosmological Physics, University of Chicago. And on the other side, Catherine McFarland, Director of Global Partnerships, Research and Development at Abbott Labs. Now, before we begin, in your packets, you've got 3x5 note cards. And I'd like you, while we're mumbling up here, to write questions that you would like addressed by us. And we will collect them in about 15, 20 minutes when Delara waves the yellow card, right? So if you can do that, that would be appreciated. We want this session to be useful for you, and we can dream up questions we think you might want answered, but we'd rather have the ones you really care about. And it's great to see you all here on a Saturday morning. As you know, this was to look at our personal stories, ambitions, and milestones. And what you don't see in our official blurbs is who we are as women. And so we're going to say a word or two about that so that you get to know us a little bit and you feel more comfortable with those questions. So I will go first. My personal story, ambitions, and milestones. So my personal story and how I got into science, I was a science undergrad. I got married as an undergrad. And my career goal was to have babies. That was it. So things in your life that change your life, or the things that you don't expect to happen. Turned out I had an infertility problem. So while I was waiting for babies, I almost finished my PhD. Wasn't I lucky? And in fact, my first 2 children are adopted. I went through all of those infertility workups. Finally, they figured it out, and then I have 2 biological babies. So I have 4 children, and I've always enjoyed both career and the family.
In terms of my personal story, I think the point I would like to make is that you don't have to know what you want to do when you start out. And I ended up going to graduate school because the job market at that time was very poor. Sound familiar? So it was only then that looking around the laboratory, originally I enrolled in a master's program because I thought, oh, I could never get a PhD, never. And I looked around the lab and I saw a number of males who intellectually were not much different than I was. So I thought, well, maybe I can do this, and went out and worked a couple years in industry and realized that the firefighting aspect of industry, at least the company in which I worked, was not in concert with the way I looked at life. And it was then that I realized that I wanted to go on go for a PhD and do a more research track.
Evelyn?
So I would say, I wouldn't say I wandered into science because I always loved math, but I didn't know what I could do with math. So I went to college and my advisor said physics would be a good idea. I said, okay, and kept going through it. Now, I didn't have a plan to get married, but I did get married as an undergraduate. I had 3 children before I finished my PhD, and found myself basically learning not to plan too long term, but to look around at the opportunities at the time, and have had an absolutely wonderful experience raising 3 children who think that physics really isn't all that hard anyway, because if mom can do it, anyone can do it. And it's all worked out very well.
Well, I have a similar theme. I went to college, I was the first person in my family, and at that point in time, women could be nurses or teachers. I really didn't like blood, but so it kind of steered me to the teaching realm. We were married as an undergraduate, and we couldn't find a job. So I got a teaching assistant in chemistry, and that's what led me into chemistry. I was only going to get my master's degree, dropped out, and again looked around and said, I can do this as well. Things started happening. So one of the things I always tell my proteges is life only makes sense when you look in the rearview mirror. So you have to live it one day at a time, and it all works out. And my most proud accomplishment, in spite of several accomplishments I've had at AWIS, is I am the proud grandmother of 2-year-old twins.
I'm going to ask the runners to collect those questions, so if you can get them ready and hold them up. And while those are being collected by some magical volunteers, we'll go on to, I think we dealt with our first question, what in the program, what we were here for. I'd like to ask you, how has science changed for women in your time, in your careers? Do you think it has changed, or are the challenges the same as when we began?
I'll jump in there maybe a little bit. So one thing that has changed immensely, I went through an undergraduate, graduate school, and 2 postdocs in physics. There was not a single female faculty member in physics at any of the 4 institutions at that time. And that's not that long ago. I graduated in 1990. So that has changed. Most departments now have several women, and it's wonderful to look around and see all of the graduate students and the postdocs. The environment has changed completely. And I'll tell one story, sort of a personal story. I mentioned I had 3 children in graduate school. I did not mention that when I went on job interviews for my postdoc years. And so I went for my first postdoc and just didn't bring up the kids for about 6 months. And when I finally did, someone came and I said, I have to go home and pick up, the kids. And they said, you have a baby? I said, well, actually, I have 3. And the faculty member at the time looked at me and he was speechless. So he left the room. And then later on at tea, we got together for tea every afternoon, and I was talking with the chair of the department at that time, and the previous faculty member came running into tea, and he comes running up, she goes, did you know that she has 3 children? And the guy literally did the thing in the sitcoms where the tea was spewing out. So the part of that story is, I suspect very strongly that had they known I had 3 children, they would not have hired me into a particle physics theoretical postdoc, which you're supposed to do nothing else but think about physics. But by that time, I'd been there 6 months, and things were going really well. We were writing papers, and so I was able to keep going like that. The change that I've seen is that one of the fellows at the Kavli Institute came to me about 1.5 years ago, and she said, I'm pregnant. And I said, that's fantastic. What can we do? We held, a party for them after they had the baby, and being able to welcome families and view women and men within our department as, sort of more whole people is absolutely wonderful. So that has been a great change.
Yes, I would agree with that, and I think certainly in universities, conversations are going on now at the highest levels about work-life balance for our faculty. And I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that we have solved these issues, but we are at least talking about them.
I see at Abbott, I know one of our CEOs set a very high standard to, really try to engage women and to retain women and to advance women. And it's really about business. If you really believe that talent is not gender specific and you only have 25% women in the workforce, you don't have your best talent. So you really need to have the best people. And I think there is that change that people are recognizing this as really a way to solve problems and so on. And I do think that the whole thing of recognizing people as people, I mean, what my son's involvement with his family is much different than what happened. And there is a need for moms and dads to have flexibility. And I do see that there's changes along those routes that are coming now.
I would echo what you've all said. I think the family-life balance is better now. I have, at the moment in my research lab, 2 graduate students, males, with new babies. And they are not afraid to say, I want to be home with my wife and baby. I want to bond with my family. I'm taking some time off. I'm leaving early. And it's okay for them too. This is good, folks, because women are not going to be equal until we can truly share our families. As long as we know the numbers the way they are now, the women have the careers and do the majority of the work at home. I see that shifting, and that's a very positive sign. On what has not changed, and I'm looking for them because whenever you have those cards ready, you can bring them up. What has not changed, there's still a barrier by all of us, by women and men, that men are better leaders, that we both expect the man to be at the top, and that is jointly an issue. And you can say, well, the pipeline has gone up, but there's some of us here at the executive level. There are only 1 in 10, 1 in 100 women. Okay, fine, but then those numbers are not represented at the leadership level. That has not changed. So I have often, I can't tell you how many times, been shortlisted for a position at another career option, and I'm always shortlisted, and they all say I'm the best candidate, and guess who gets the job? It isn't me. I've had a fantastic life, and I love what I'm doing, and I've always been positive, and have been able to do much. But I'm quite sure if I'd been a man, I would have been in a different position than I am. And it's not changing, and that scares me. Here we have your questions, which should be fun.
Well,
we have not seen these.
While Brenda is looking at those questions, there's one plug I'd like to make for something that hasn't changed in science, and that is science and technology and engineering. And that is from a career perspective. These are fantastic careers which afford a constant sense of renewal or a constant opportunity to reinvent oneself as you begin to tackle different problems. And that I think is a constant that we would share here.
Here's one question, and you can keep bringing them up. Oh, another batch. We're going to be busy, and you're going to be flagging that card saying our time is up. Why do you think that doctors, lawyers, bioscience fields are now about 50-50 in women, yet not for engineering or physics?
Or chemistry.
Chemistry. I can jump in a little bit there. Whatever's happening in physics is happening at the undergraduate level. We can see that physics high school classes are roughly 50-50 for women, but by the time you get to the bachelor's degree, it's down to about 21%. What we don't know yet is exactly what's happening, whether there's some structural barrier, and one of the things I think that's challenging is for physics and engineering, you need to make a decision that that's what you want to do before you go to college. It's true for engineering because you have to apply to engineering schools, and it's not technically true for physics, but it ends up being that the people that major in physics are the ones that go in having known that that's what they want to do. And it doesn't have to be that way. And
I would add, the women in engineering are attracted to bioengineering and things like environmental science. And I think that is a gender difference, that women are looking, I hate to say prejudicial things, but are attracted to the areas that are positive and constructive for the world. So medicine is that way, and life science. And when it is in engineering, doesn't mean it's not going to be particle physics, but just looking at the undergrads and the graduates, that's where the women head first. There's a little bit more of acceptance. Should we go on to the next question, or do you have?
I was just going to say that I think in terms of changing the demographics in fields, that there was also a financial incentive in medicine and law for that demographic to change. And I don't think we see that as strongly in science and engineering.
Here's another question. We are aware that there are salary differentials between men and women. What's the best way to initiate change in an organization to correct the gender bias in salaries?
I think part of the issue is that women tend not to be advanced as fast. Part of it is because of this perception, and part of it is because of reality that maybe, particularly when you have children, people aren't moving around and doing things. Part of it is, and one of the things we've been trying to do at Abbott is to ask people, don't assume that because you have 3 children, you would not be interested in this manager role, but actually to ask that. I think the other thing, and this was certainly the case in my career, I sort of assumed everybody was a mind reader and would figure out what I needed. And if I was good enough, they would sort of notice, and therefore it would happen. And so I got actually the job I wanted like 6 years later, and they were like, well, we didn't know you wanted that, because I'd actually never told anybody. And I think that, one of the key things for women is to just tell people. That doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow, but set that expectation, put your name out there, then go to lunch with the person. Again, part of it is familiarity. I still believe that many decisions are made both on talent and on comfort, because in the end, we're still people. And if you know somebody better, no matter what the gender, and all other things being equal, I believe that that's what will actually get selected. So I think that some of those sort of proactive things we don't do as well, and part of it is, we don't have time, we don't have this. And Abbott did an interesting study. The work-life issues are they're the same for men and women, but the impact of many of those issues is still larger on women. Even though it's changing, women still have larger health care or child care duties. They still take care of the parents more, and those sort of things, and that does tend to influence that.
Can I jump in here with a quick one too, because there are a lot of young women in the audience. One of the things I've seen as someone who's hired quite a few people, women we're trained in our culture not to be as to ask for something, and we don't negotiate as well. So when I had people negotiating, both men and women, the guys would come in and they would say, now I need this, and they would ask for more and in a way that they expected it, and the women would say, well, I guess if you gave me this, I'd be okay with that. And I think, so if you're going out to negotiate for a job, talk to your mentor and do some practice interviews.
Talk to your mentor and buy Negotiation for Dummies. Really, I mean,
and it's interesting because I was at a seminar, and there was some data that in business they have these little simulations. Women are absolutely identical in negotiation skills in a business setting, but then when they put it in the personal setting, men were much worse, because we really don't put ourselves forward, and think of it as a win-win situation. I could offer this, how about that? Then we'll both be better.
There's a book that you all should buy called Women Don't Ask. And I think one of the co-authors of that book was in the Chicago area not so long ago. Linda Babcock is one. But it's just
shout it out if you know.
I want to say there's a follow-up book called Ask for It.
Ask for It.
Follow-up book called Ask for It.
And so they're both volumes on negotiation skills.
So negotiation, 101, don't be the first to name the price, because you can always come down, but you can't go back up. That's probably the most important rule. And ask for 10% more at least than you think you could possibly get. And do your homework. Go on your listservs and your national rankings and find out what the mean salary is for that job, or ask people, so that you don't undersell yourself. We don't do things like that. Men do. I mean, and women are afraid to do, but we're not fearful people. We will do that.
There are many things to negotiate besides salary.
Yes.
One of my colleagues in engineering was featured very highly in a department newsletter, and she also found out that she was the lowest paid individual in the department. And so when the time came for her annual review, she brought along a department newsletter and placed it in front of the department chair and said, "Now, do you see my work highlighted here?" And he said, "Well, of course I do." And she said, "Well, then can you explain to me why I'm at the low point in the salary?"
Here's from a new batch, and they keep on coming. I have one suggestion, that these questions somehow be typed up and shared for some lists, because they're anonymous, but they're really good questions. We won't get through all of them. There's the idea that it's not a glass ceiling, it's a sticky floor, which speaks to women's learned behaviors that sabotage their own careers. What are some highlighted behaviors that you see as needing some even small intervention?
I was at a seminar a couple years ago, and since I've managed mostly men, because I was a manager of scientists, and this was very insightful. The word no means different to men and women.
For sure.
And to a man, it means no, not now, and to a woman, it means no, not ever. And so this really, so if the guy is coming in to negotiate, it's like, well, I told you no yesterday, why are you back today? And if the woman goes in and asks, it's like, okay, I was told no. But it's really a subtle thing, and once you sort of recognize that, it both makes you better as a person, but it's particularly important as you're managing people to look out for that subtle difference. And if you really start analyzing it, there's a lot to that very, very simple behavioral difference.
There's also the issue of when something goes wrong, blaming it on yourself. It's not always about you. There are a lot of things that can contribute to something failing, and it's important to learn early on that you need not always blame yourself.
Sticky floor, Evelyn?
I would go back to the confidence issues again. Too many times I see women who have left science, colleagues, friends, people who work for me, and it's because they think they're not doing well enough, they're not good enough, whereas their male counterparts who are doing the same in terms of grades or how they're perceived by the professors stick with it. So there's a certain amount of, if you love what you're doing, focus on that and keep going at it, and you'll build the confidence up that way.
It's amazing how many times I hear women say, I've done this and this and this, but I didn't do that quite as well as I should have.
Mm-hmm. Yes, one workshop I went to, the theme was start a conversation with a small group saying something, but, and then give all the negative reasons, and then do the same question again and start it with and. Mm-hmm. And if you frame your life with the and, you look for the positive, and that gets you to a better end point, because the buts, the butt can butt you out, really. Women who leave academia or the lab but are still involved in science-related areas are considered as having left science. Why is that? I don't hear the same language when referring to men.
I guess I haven't seen, in general, when people leave science, it's viewed as leaving academic science, which is because there's a very, very narrow view. Within academia, everyone who's teaching undergraduates, everyone who's teaching graduates, that's the world they live in, and they're sort of viewing that as the path towards the only thing they know. And I have seen some changes in this more recently. We've been, and I think partly because federal agencies like NSF have been requiring us to think about education and outreach. So the views towards people who leave physics, in any case, and go out and do something outreach related is viewed very differently than it was 20 years ago. And this is a really positive change for both men and women, that it's viewed as, this is great, this is good for the field, and we're excited you're doing it.
I think there's the depth and breadth. If you're really focused at the lab, no matter whether you're in industry or academics, you have to be very deep. As you start doing other things, then you have to broaden out the skills, and by definition, you really can't have that same level of expertise. So there is a point in your career, and certainly in industry, you face that where you sort of make a decision point. You're really not going to discover that major breakthrough if I turn and do something more general. And so even in academics, we view we always kind of joke it's going to the dark side or whatever, but you've left sort of the pure science thing. And it can be a really difficult decision because it is hard once you've got over to this other point. There's really no point of no return.
But there's never, what's the point of returning? You're moving on.
That's correct.
If you look at the PhDs granted in science, it's always been the larger fraction didn't stay in the university. Folks, I'm in a university. We don't have jobs for everyone we educate. We might have thought that we did, but we're quantitative enough to know that that's not the case. A science education is never wasted. The problem in the world is we don't have enough quantitative, fact-based, evidence-based thinkers. And so whatever you do with your science, it will be of value to you that you went through whatever training you did at whatever level. I'm one of the many things I do is I'm an accreditor for universities. Universities are licensed to give degrees. So I see what the programs are, the requirements for a bachelor's degree. And they're shockingly low in anything quantitative. The students don't come in from high school, they don't have to know much, and they don't learn any more in college. So we've got a huge problem. You're not wasting your life. The world's a better place because we are all scientists. Here's the next question. Do women face discrimination in the science workplace? I say we do.
Yes?
All right, on to the next question. Do you think women think about and approach science differently than men?
I'm going to go out, I'm going to just jump in here. I don't think so. And I know a lot of people disagree with me on this, but I think different people think about problems differently. And there are people who approach it from many different points of view. What I haven't seen is that there's a real gender separation there. We each bring to our science the things that we've learned through, every other facet of our life. And so sometimes, women and men have been brought up differently. But I think intrinsically, when when we're at the blackboard and we're working through some problem and trying to understand what we actually can extract from this data about dark matter, there is no gender to the way we're approaching the problem. There just isn't.
I'm not sure that that's right. I think that women are going to do even better in the future because women have been indoctrinated with being team players and shared group activities. And science has gone from being the solo mom and pop shop to big team collaborative ventures. And there, the role of the woman who's listening and looking and seeking and consensus building is going to be more powerful. Now, that's not that men don't do that. The successful men do. But I think women, perhaps, I don't believe men and women are identical or equal. We have the babies, they don't. There are other things about the way we behave, either cultural or biological. And so I think the advantages are going to come our way. Here's a comment.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it has now been well demonstrated that the best teamwork comes from diverse teams, and that diversity can play many different forms, whether it's gender, whether it's culture, whether it's just a diversity of opinion. But I think those are the richest and most successful teams.
Here's a longer question, but an interesting one. There's been talk about the words that we use to describe women versus men, and these affect how women move up the pipeline. For example, in letters of recommendation, females are frequently described by both men and women as hardworking, while men are described as innovative. What are your thoughts on how our everyday language affects the progression of women in the field?
I think one of the most important things that's happening on many university campuses now is in the training of search committees for hiring. And it addresses this specifically, that once people who are evaluating resumes and dossiers and letters of recommendation, once they are aware of this difference, they are then more in tune to keeping their antennae up, if you will, to try and set those issues apart. So I'm not sure how successful we will be in the short term in changing that, but what we can do is make people more aware that this is happening so that they can set those issues aside.
And I would say that echoing what you've said, Kathy, is that this is allowing us to approach some of these issues like scientists. So their biases are out there, are sort of, you know, our detectors in terms of how we evaluate, how we read these things. We can learn more about them, we can characterize them, and then we can begin to you know, devise programs that allow us to mitigate the effects of these things. So I think that's really encouraging. I think we have a long way to go in making all of this happen, but the more we can recognize there's research out there that shows the effect of these various biases, and let's do something about it.
I think that's where we can help each other too, because as we see these, and once, you know, you sort of have that aha moment and see this, you know, you can like read each other's letters of recommendation and see, you know, because it slips in, and you know, you'll be sitting there trying to do it differently, and suddenly it just sort of sneaks in on you. And I think if we use each other as resources, you know, we can help work it on both ends and take that language out of our vocabulary. I mean, it's been with us for years and years, so it's not a magic fix, but I think there's some other proactive things we can do.
Yeah, UIC is one of the universities with the WISES program that is evaluating how come there are these biases. And I was shocked when I went through one of the training sessions about writing letters of recommendation that, you know, I was guilty of saying the softer, friendlier, more nurturing things about the women, and even though I had nurturing men, I wasn't using the same language. And so I look back, sorry to have a former student here, and found I had actually been putting this gender bias into my own recommendation letters. So I needed to be trained to stop doing that. And there are very interesting studies where you take a resume and have it as John Smith or Jane Smith, and it's J. Smith throughout, and see what committees do. And both men and women go for the male name. It's the same resume. So, you know, folks, we can change. We can begin the change, and we can teach the people who are not in the room today to change as well. How are we doing on time?
Almost
5, okay. What advice would you give to a girl who is interested in science but is struggling with fear? I mean, I have daughters and they didn't struggle with fear, but I'm a scientist, so I don't know the answer to this question because I think science is just a whole bunch of fun.
You know, I have one practical solution, because I don't know if everyone's done this, but there were different points in my career where it did get hard, and I wasn't quite sure what the next step was, what I should keep doing. You know, was it time for me to think about something else? So this sounds a little hokey maybe, but what I would do is make a list of the pros and cons, reasons I thought maybe I should leave science or reasons for staying. And when I wrote it down and looked at it, it jumped off the page at me. All the reasons for leaving were confidence issues in one way or another. And all the reasons for staying, I really love this. I'm really excited about doing this. I would, want to continue with this. I have this idea, I have that. And when I looked at that, I said, you know what? If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to let my own, fears, in a sense, keep me from doing it. And you'd be amazed. You get over that period, and then you go through a period where things are going really well, and the research is working out. And so when you come to the tough spots, and sometimes you might make that list and say, you know what, I don't like what I'm doing anymore. It's for some reason, I'm really excited about doing this thing over here, which is science related, but not the research. But at least give yourself a chance to think through and recognize, wait a minute, these are sort of standard competence issue things. And
I'm not sure that's unique to scientists either.
probably not.
Yes.
Right.
Just a quick one. One other method of dealing with that is to bring people together who are also feeling those same things. And when they see that they're not alone in those feelings of lack of confidence or whatever, then they come to the realization, well, we can get through this.
Yes, fear can be conquered. Has your path been linear, or did you hit obstacles that rerouted you? Can you describe challenges, obstacles, and what opportunities came as a result of rerouting? If you look, I think the most boring people that I meet are the people I interview for the MD PhD program who've known.
I hope there are none in the audience.
Well, they're still boring. They knew from the time they toddled what their life was going to be, and they see it from here to death, right? And they're just so shut in. They're not going to have an interesting life. I mean, the ones that get admitted are the ones that don't think that way. But they're so regimented, and they're so unoriginal, and they're so, I don't know. Life is going to hit them hard sometime, because we don't control the world controls us.
We can't predict the future either.
You can't predict the future, and you don't know where the big things are going to come and change your life. So there are going to be those reroutings. And I think the measure of the person is how you manage the stresses and strains when, not if, when encountered.
And there's always good times and bad in careers. Yeah. And you often, although it's not the fun times, you often learn more in the bad times. And once you figure out your way through there, so it's not always an upward journey.
So rerouting is good, I think, but.
I think, I talked a little bit earlier about the confidence issues, but I think what you said about talking to someone else, so having some good colleagues that you can support each other. And, I remember sitting down with a friend who's an extremely talented scientist, a very creative person, and she was going through a tough period, and just listening to her say, I'm not sure about this, and I'm thinking, how could you even begin to question yourself? So I think being able to have someone there that can say to you, you're doing fantastic things, and I'm really impressed with what you've accomplished so far. We can help each other that way too.
So we have just 2 minutes left, and I'm going to ask the panel to say something. I mean, we didn't cover even a small fraction of the questions, but is there something that didn't come up that you thought that you would like to add to the comments, starting with you, Kath?
Well, I think the thing you can probably do best is to try to find somebody. In the early days, I can still remember my very first meeting in Abbott when there was a second woman there. So it's gender, it doesn't have to be a woman, but do find somebody that you can talk to. It's really a help. And keep an open mind. We can't predict the future. Things that you think could be like the worst thing that ever happened to you may turn out to be one of the better things that happened, and you just sort of have to live life one day at a time, and keep a look at yourself and keep your confidence, and things will work out. And I think sometimes we let the big things look too big and forget that point.
And I guess I would say we talk a lot about the challenges and the biases and some of those things, and at the end of the day, what I want to say is I think it's worth it. I mean, it's the fact that I get to spend at least part of some days thinking about really cool questions and trying to understand, you know, what the universe is made of and dark matter and things like this. It's wonderful, and it's, you know, try to keep focused on why you want to do and why you want to even get, keep going along a particular career path. And I just, you know, I don't think we say as scientists enough, it's really great.
It's fun.
Take advantage of serendipity.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
So, I mean, to summarize, I would say we have so much potential, and I know that we're all going to have great lives because we are who we are. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.